With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Tes. We are going to start on top of the Daf, on top of the Amid by the Mishnah. We're going to be speaking about the intent, or what type of intent is necessary in the construction of a Sukkah, introducing the din of a Sukkah Yeshana. We already mentioned this din yesterday. We're going to clarify something in today's Mishnah. We're going to be learning that the wood of a sukkah is prohibited for benefit all 7 days of sukkahs. We're going to be having a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds that one is allowed to build a sukkah on Chol Hamoed, meaning that we don't need for the sukkah to be there for the entirety of the 7 days. Beis Shammai holds that a sukkah is only valid if it was available. That means it was b'metzias for all of the 7 days of sukkahs. And just concluding the sugya of sukkah yeshana, which really has to do that Beis Hillel holds you don't need to build a sukkah l'shem mitzvah sukkah, that Beis Hillel will agree that by tzitzis, you do have to make the tzitzis. We'll see starting at what step l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. If there was a lack of that intent, the tzitzis is invalid, and we're going to find out why is it that that level of asiyah l'shma is needed by tzitzis and not needed by the making of a sukkah. We're going to have during the sukkah a very interesting tosfos on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, which is quoted many times, which is the last tosfos on Tes Amud Aleph. Mitzvah haba ba'aveda l'shitas tosfos is only a problem that's midrabanan, and as we will see how that's important to better understand our sugya. Now on Daf Tes Amud Beis, we're going to learn another Mishnah that's going to be speaking about two scenarios. Number one is what will be the din of a sukkah that was built under a tree. Concept will be that we know that there are three dinim concerning the schach, three negative dinim, or three dinim. It has to be something that grows from the ground, but it may now not be connected to the ground. And it also has to be something that's currently not yet a proper keli, which means it's not susceptible to be mekabel tameh. Branches that are connected to the tree are connected, so they are not kosher schach. Any schach underneath it is, so to say, non-existent because it's not needed, and therefore there's going to be an issue of building a sukkah under a tree, but it goes beyond what we think. The Mishnah is going to bring another din, which will further clarify that, and that is that if one builds a sukkah under a sukkah, the Mishnah says the bottom sukkah is not valid. Let me just explain what that means. If you have the top sukkah's floor is kosher schach, it's not that there's a proper flooring and underneath the floor you built another sukkah. The floor is a halachically kosher schach. The schach on top is also kosher schach. So if someone is in the bottom, you would think, what's wrong with being in the sukkah that's tachas ha-sukkah? So what that there are two layers of schach? They're both kosher schach. Yet the Mishnah is going to tell us that only the top sukkah is okay, the bottom sukkah is not okay. We're going to understand the source for that, the reason for that. And having said that, Rabbi Yirmi on Daf Tes Amud Beis is going to give four scenarios where there's one sukkah, either sukkah al gavas sukkah, sometimes it's called sukkah tachas sukkah, it's the same thing. And there can be all four outcomes where both are valid, both are not valid. Only the top one is valid, only the bottom one is valid, and the Gemara is going to speak out and explain each case of Rabbi Yirmiyah, and obviously it doesn't contradict the Mishnah. The Mishnah is only focusing on that case where the top one is kosher and the bottom one will be not kosher or psula, invalid. Chavra, let's start on top of the Amid with the Mishnah. Okay, the case of the Mishnah is called a old sukkah. An old sukkah, right away Rashi, a sukkah that was built 30 days or more prior to sukkahs. Now I have to make a very important clarification and correction to something that I said wrongfully yesterday. I was speaking about many people in their homes that they have a retractable roof. What we're saying now is even in Shulchan Aruch, the way we teach the Mishnah, there's a machlokes in the Rishonim. The Mishnah is b'chlal not focusing on the walls. Sukkah Yeshua means when was the schach laid? So if you have a proper home and you laid the schach within 30 days, that's avada good. Sukah Yeshana means that since the schach was placed, like Rashi writes, koidim lachag shloishim yom or more, 30 days or more prior to the chag, and therefore the presumption will be that it was not put there l'shem mitzvah sukkah. And to repeat something that we learned yesterday, good. Yet, even according to Beis Hillel, that you don't need to place it l'shem mitzvah sukkah, it needed to be placed to create shade and to create shelter. Shelter and shade go together. What's for sure not good, not even according to Beis Hillel, if this whole structure that was built, not only was it not built l'shem mitzvah sukkah, it wasn't built l'shem schach. You needed a private environment. Punkt, it happened to be that what you built has a shtickle covering. That's not going to be good.
What about people that leave bamboo all year, or is it too early to ask this question?
That's what we're talking about. If you leave the bamboo the whole year. So the bamboo was placed, even if the bamboo was not placed l'shem mitzvah sukkah, as long as the roof, the schach, was placed to create shelter and shade, that's the question. Is it a valid sukkah or not? Machloikes. Beishamai hold paisel. Beishamai holds that the din of lishma, asiya lishma, lishma means l'shem mitzvah sukkah is needed. The Mishnah is going to say in 2 lines that even according to Beishamai, if you placed it, like you said, Semach, 364 days, or in Shnas Halavana, 353 days before sukkahs, but if you placed it l'shem mitzvah sukkah, it's good. This man is not really the ikid. It's about that there's a presumption that if you build something shloishim yom or before, prior, you're not having in mind the mitzvah yet. Beishamai paislim, you need mitzvah l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Beis Hillel are machshirim. You don't need for the schach to be laid l'shem mitzvah sukkah, but again, it has to have been put there for shelter and shade. And before we go on, something that people are familiar with. Quickly, the top Tosfos. Tosfos quotes a Yerushalmi. We paskin like Beis Hillel. Yeah, it's like the Yerushalmi. Tzarech lechadish ba davar. Even though you don't need to place it l'shem mitzvah sukkah, but if it was not placed for the mitzvah sukkah, it's lechatchila better that you should do something to it. And he gives the 2 options: either to take a tefach amount of schach to lift it up and put it back. So even though you're only taking out a tefach, epis, or Tosfos brings over there from Yerushalmi Rabbi Yossi that says that you should lift even one thin line, not even a tefach, but al pnei kula. That's lechatchila. And many people are familiar with this. There are other dinim that we mentioned quickly yesterday. Today we say that if a goy built a sukkah lechatchila, it's not ideal. So what people do is that they lift the schach and they put it back down. The concept of l'chadish badavar by a yid. Or l'chadish badavar l'shem mitzvahs sukkah. Back inside the Mishnah, the ezu hi sukkah yeshana. Kol sha'asa koidim l'chag shloishim yom. As we said, there's a presumption that if a sukkah was built 30 days or earlier prior to sukkahs, it was not built l'shem mitzvah. Aval im asa l'shem chag. Then afilu mitchilas hashana k'sheida, even according to Beishamai. Gavalik, simple, clear Mishnah. Says the Gemara. My Talmud the Beishamai. Where do we find in the source that you have to build the schach? L'shem mitzvah, Amar Krot says on Parshas Emor. Chag hasukos shivas yomim lashem. Right? Zot Beishamai sukkah ho asuya l'shem chag bo'inon. In other words, it says, right? First Rashi in the Gemara. Sukkah l'shem chag diksiv sukkos lashem. Just, take out the words in between. However, Beis Hillel, yes, Taka state, Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yamam Lashem, Ahomebayle to teach you another din. Look at the Rab Sheshes. To Amar Rab Sheshes, Mishum Rabbi Akiva, Minayin, from where do we know, La'atzei Sukkah Sha'asurim Kol Shiva, that we may not derive benefit from the materials of the Sukkah for all of the 7 days. Chava, huge Machlokes Rishonim. Are we referring only to the schach? Or does this taka mean that nothing that you built into the sukkah is allowed to be used kol shiva? Just to be aware of that. Another very important Tosfos here. We're going to learn mamash soon that there's a concept of since when bein hashmashos of sukkahs came in, very similar to many halachas and Shabbos. Let's say that we're speaking about the schach. The schach was designated l'shem mitzvah, So it remains muktzah-like, which is a rabbinic concept for the rest of Yom Tov. We're going to learn these words in Chazal. Whenever we refer to the materials of the sukkah being muktzah during the 7 days of Sukkot, l'chorah, that means it's an isur midrabanan. And here, when we're asking for a pasuk, right, how do we know that? So Tosfos right away writes that like this. I'm reading inside the middle of the third Tosfos, minayin la'atzei sukkah shusum kol shav. It's a very important clarification. In middle, if you see the base of the bach at the end of that line in Tosfos, v'yesh loimen. The asun midoy raisa. The Chazal that we're quoting, taka that it's asun midoy raisa. Hainu bo'oida kayemes. What we are learning now is that while the sukkah is still standing during the 7 days, asur litl mimena eitzim. And again, guys, to make it clear, it's not clear. Does eitzim mean only the schach? Many Rishonim say that eitzim means no, the walls were made out of wood. Don't take a piece of wall off. That's asur midoy raisa. When we're going to learn later in Chazal that since it was iskatzoi in the entrance of Sukkot, bein hashmoshes, it remains designated for the rest of Yom Tov, that says Tosfos is another thing, that even if the Sukkah collapsed, aval mishen nafla, and therefore the batla mitzvasa, the source that we are learning won't cover the isur. There's another isur midrabanan. Lo yasira ela midrabanan. Let's just have one mahalach. There are many other approaches. This is very important because then people get confused. 1 second, it's muktzah or there's a pasuk. Tosfos clarifies, when the sukkah is standing, you removing atzei hasukah is asun midoy raisa.
What about adding schach? Is that also muktzah the whole Yom Tov?
The schach for sure. Tzemach the schach for sure. There are many Rishonim that understand that what we are learning now means not only the schach, but anything that you built into the sukkah. Let's go with Tosfos. That is the sukkah standing. You may not remove it.
I'm talking about new schach. If you realize you don't have enough, you want to add.
So then you want to know whether that new schach, so this
is muktzah. Is muktzah.
The muktzah, no. We'll see soon. The isur of muktzah is only if when sukkahs entered, it was muktzah. It's mamash, like I give you an example. Remember, if the bus is still davar ha'asur, it's only if it was a buses bein hashmoshes, then it remains a buses, right? If it's a buses the davar ha'asur, and then you added in Shabbos or davar hamuter. Remember those dinim? Doesn't help. But if when Shabbos came in, it was a buses for both, then for a moment it was only a buses the davar ha'asur. You can make it a buses the davar hamuter again.
Rabbi, I think the issue was with people that would hang fruit as decorations in their sukkah, and then they decide they want to eat it.
Exactly. What Danny's mentioning is just an application of this big machloikas that we're speaking about now. Whether this chazal is only for the schach, he's giving an example. We're going to learn that in Daf Yud about noyei sukkah. If it goes to anything that you connected to the sukkah, is there a problem of using it? And according to some, Danny, it's an isur doiraisa. Wow. When it's still connected. Let's go back inside the Gemara. So again, Rav Sheshes, what's Rabbi Akiva, minayin la'atzei sukkah shasurim kol shiva Talmud loimer, he uses this pasuk. What does the pasuk say? It says, Chag HaSukkah shivas yamim l'Hashem, that for all 7 days, it's set aside for God. Another Tana, another Braisa, V'tanya. I mean, this is Rav Sheshes, but Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Here we have a Braisa. Rebbe Yehuda ben Meseiro Omer, Kishem Shechal, Shem Shemaim ala Chagigim. Chag is like Merames, Korban Chagigim. Like, wow, Korban, Kachem, no one is going to derive any benefit. Kach, Chal, Shem Shemaim ala Sukkah. Wow. Shenemar Chag, HaSukkah, Shivas Yomam L'Hashem. Ma Chag L'Hashem, Af Sukkah L'Hashem. So therefore, it's not available Lebeisilo, for you to use it to teach you that you have to build it Lashem L'Shem Mitzvah Sukkah. Problem is that this halacha, that there's an Isur D'Oraisor for you to use Atzei Sukkah if the Sukkah did not fall down. Kol Shiva Beis Shammai also agrees to. And this is the source. So therefore we have to find a new source for the din of our Mishnah for Beis Shammai that you have to build the schach. Not the walls. We don't care about the walls. The schach, the shem mitzvahs, sukkah, ubei shamay nami miboy leilahachi. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ein achanami ela maitamay ubei shamay kra ksiv kra achrino. Now we're going to Parshas Re'ei. First in Parshas Re'ei, chag sukkah is tasel lecha shivas yomim. Oh, sagt ubei shamay sukkah ho asuya l'shem chag bo'inan. I just want to say it's so geschmack that Rashi over here. Rashi says like this. Take the words Chag HaSukkah is Tase, And Rashi says, 14 lines from the top of the Amid, mix the words around, be mesaris, reorganize the words, and now read it, Sukah tasa lachag. Herst, chag Sukah tasa. So just rearrange the words, Sukah tasa lechag. That's mamish good. Make the Sukkah l'shem achag, l'shem hamitzvah. Ubeis Hillel, hahumi boile, to tell you another than afaket leniency. I want you to know that you are allowed to build a sukkah during Chol HaMoed. We're not talking about melach and Chol HaMoed. That's not the focus here. Focus here is that do we say that a sukkah is only valid if it was available for all 7 days, which is Beis Shammai. Was even if you build a kosher sukkah during Chol HaMoed, the fact that it wasn't available for the whole 7 days, it's not valid at all. So Beis Hillel uses this pasuk to tell you that you don't need to build it for all 7 days. Abi, you made a sukkah during the Chag. Okay. Ubeis Shammai, they can't use the pasuk to tell you that as even if you made it during the Chag. You understand? Chag Sukah tasa again. Sukah tasa also be mesaresid. Make the sukkah during the Chag. Of course, not on Yom Tov on Chol HaMoed. Beis Shammai cannot learn it that way because he disagrees with this. Beis Shammai svidalu, like we know later from the Tanach Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar ein loisen sukkah b'choyloi shel moyed. All right. Now says the Gemara. The presumption is that l'shitas Beis Hillel, items that are used for other mitzvahs also don't need to be made l'shem that mitzvah. That's the premise of the next kash. I mean, why would sukkah be different? So that's the rule. B'chlal, you're making something for a mitzvah, you don't need to make it l'shem. Problem is, ubeis Hillel leis lohu the Rav Yehuda Amarav. Of course, we know Rav Yehuda Amarav are Amoraim. It's not that Beis Hillel has to agree with an Amoida, but when an Amoida made a statement and we don't find anyone that disagreed with it, we don't know of anyone that argued with it, it's going to be what? And Beis Hillel, even if there was a machlokes tanoim, we normally pass on like Beis Hillel. What do we know from Rabbi Yehuda Marav later? He spoke about tzitzis. We're going to tzitzis. And he was lenient, Rav. He says like this, that if you made the tzitzis, we're speaking about the actual fringes that are hung at the corners, min hakoitzim. Hakoitzim are thorn-like threads. What's pshat thorn-like threads? So Rashi writes like this, that chutim, I'm reading Rashi, shenitku b'shesi. So when you have the warp threads are the threads that go in the length. And sometimes they get ripped. And the weaver will fix them by making a knot and keep on going, but that knot will protrude. Now imagine if that knot that's protruding is mamash by the fringe, is at the end of the garment. Aside of other issues that you might be thinking about, the focus is one, that when you made that knot, even if the knot is so long that fringe could be used for one of our chutim, you didn't place it there l'shem mitzvah. You simply made a knot. That's the problem. It wasn't placed at the corner of the garment l'shem mitzvah tzitzis or min hanimin. Nimin are embroidery threads, which are in other words, if you have an extra thread that remains because you were embroidering the edges, the parameter of the garment. Here also, even if the length of the thread, perimeter. Even if the length, there are many other dinim and tzitzis, but since the placement of this thread on the garment was not done for the mitzvah, was done because you were embroidering it, or umin ha-giradin, giradin are pashat fringes. We have, in our talesos today, we have fringes to beautify the ends of the garments. Now we have the fringes on the talos gadol, it doesn't go all the way to the corner, but if you had fringes all the way to the corner, there also Sometimes they made the fringes because when you had the warp threads again, sometimes the warp threads went beyond the woof threads. So when it went beyond it, instead of you trimming it up, you make these nice fringes. The point is that when all different types of weaving, if you have chutin that are in the right place, but they were not placed there, l'shem mitzvah, so Rav was heard saying psula. However, Rav was the lenient. Rav holds that min hasisin, sisin are balls of weaving thread. In other words, that threads that were spun into the balls, they were spun not l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. Rav holds that's all fine. No, it's from when do you need to have l'shem mitzvah tzitzis? From when you place it on the beged. Guys, you know today that whenever you have, like today it's midrabanan, we have all of the beautiful minhagim, that we have 5 knots, and it's very common that the final knot becomes loose. And you know, when we're boidik the tzitzis as we should, you know that when you tighten the knots, we're supposed to say l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. Today, as when you fix the kesher of the tefillin, you say l'shem kedushas tefillin, you know, kedusha, because there's the words of scripture written on it, tashmisha kedusha, tashmisha mitzvah. Anyways, Rav holds that the making of the threads doesn't have to be done l'shma. The placement has to be done l'shma. And then, Rav passed away, so the Talmud Rav Yehuda went to a new teacher, Shmuel, and when he repeated to Shmuel that which Rav said, Shmuel was even more machmir. Amar li, this is what Rav Yehuda is sharing. Shmuel told me, no, af men asis and ami psulam. It's even the spinning of the thread has to be done l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. Alma, that even the tefilla you need l'shma. So l'chu'ura hachinami b'niboya Sukah asuya l'shma. And it's very strange to say that Rav and Shmuel are going to follow Beis Shammai. Like, is it that way?
The kasha on Rav and Shmuel. Why is the kasha?
No, that's okay. That's okay. Shlem is pointing out the obvious. It doesn't matter. We're making the premises wrong. The Gemara just wants to show you the irony that don't think that the din of Beis Hillel is across the board. It's not. Says the Gemara, no. Tzitzis is unique. Shani Hassan, that look kula alma. I want you to know, guys, that the step we learned this in a while back in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, all of the steps of there's like the combing of the wool before you spin it. Even that, guys, lechatchila should be done l'shma. You have no idea how important it is in the production of the threads. And Achanami, this is different because it says, and we're beginning quoting a pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze, it says, Gedilim ta'ase loch. Gedilim is fringes, make for you, loch, for you meaning not for you, for you, for the mitzvah. Loch, which is an extra word, is l'shem choyvach, for the sake of your obligation. So there's a pasuk. So the Gemara counters, hold on, you have exactly the same wordings by a sukkah. Hachinami, it says, chag hasukos taseh. Same thing. Why don't we interpret? Why doesn't Beis Hillel interpret? L'cha l'shem choyvcha. Nah, it's not used for that. It's needed for something more basic. Hahu, the pasuk that we have by Sukkah is to tell you lima'ute gizula. Gizula, guys, refers here to any of the materials of the sukkah. We're going to learn later about karka and an exelis. Forget about that. Materials. If a person stole materials of the sukkah and they're building a sukkah out of it, this pasuk of chag asukah is tasalocha is coming to teach you that it's not going to be a valid sukkah. Frek Tosfos, why do we need to have a pasuk? That's a big Tosfos here. Isn't there a rule that any mitzvah, ba'aveda, is not a good mitzvah? If you stole the materials and you made a mitzvah out of it, that's the Tosfos, the last Tosfos on the Amud.
Gzela in of itself is usher. Anything that's stolen.
Huh?
Anything that's stolen. I don't need to learn it from a pasuk.
No, we're not saying that you can't steal it, Samach. We're saying that if someone used those stolen materials into the sukkah is not valid. And for that we need a pasuk. And Tosfos asks, even that doesn't need a pasuk. Since you're only doing a mitzvah because of your sin, so it's a mitzvah that's coming through sin, we know our rule, a mitzvah b'aveda is not a valid mitzvah. So Tosfos says via Shloim, and I'm reading one sheet over here, the Tama, the mitzvah, haba b'aveda, lav the oiraisa elamid rabbanon. And we are looking to say that sukkah is unique beyond all the other mitzvahs. Here, if a person built a sukkah from materials that were stolen, it's biblically invalid. Why? Because we use the lacha. The problem is, why don't we use the same lacha by tzitzis for the same way? No, it's if we need a da'iraisa to invalidate a mitzvah b'aveda, unique in a certain case. So it says gedilim taseh loch. How can we say loch it has to be done l'shem choyvach? Say the same thing. That Torah is writing the word loch to tell you that you can't steal a string and make out of it tzitzis. The word says, no, I'll tell you the difference. By tzitzis, God wrote twice. Now, it's not lucha, but it's another word, which means the same thing. Where's the other word? Where's the ikar? Parsha tzitzis and Parsha shlach. That over there by tzitzis, it says, va'asu lohem. Va'asu, why lohem? Misha lohem. So from the pasuk and shlach, we already ruled out beyond the rabbinic mitzvah ba'avera that the fringes, that the tzitziyos may not be done b'gzelim. So later in Parshas Kiseitze, which is state gedilim tasel loch, that's taka extra. That's used loch l'shem chayvach. By Sukah, there's only once Chag Sukkah is tasel lecha. That lecha is used to tell you that a Sukkah gezula is invalid biblically. The kid said, let's go weiter. There's so much over here.
When you say lishma, the tzitzis have to be made lishma. It's the beged or the tzitzis, the etzem tzitzis?
Very good. Not the beged, but and not only do we have to place the fringes, even tighten the knots, l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, but the fabrication of, the making of the threads from a certain point, certainly in the last point of spinning it. Spinning is when you spin it, then it goes into the ball. Even the combing.
Rabbi,
yes.
Can you clarify again, why are we only comparing to tzitzis? Like, what about matzah? We always do l'shem mitzvahs matzah when they're making the matzah, or many other mitzvahs that you have to have kavanah on. Why are we making this comparison?
No, the older Hashem speak about it. Guys, this daf is so loaded. We can the people spend in yeshiva, I'm sure, a whole year, mamish. In Brisk, they would stop here and they would move out next year. Let's go weiter. Okay, next Mishnah. And as we spoke in the introduction, guys, this mitzvah has two dinim. It's two separate, there are two statements in this Mishnah. Din number one. You have branches, like we said, schach has to be something that comes from the ground, but currently used as schach. It must be disconnected from the ground. If you have a tree and branches are extending or hanging based over a certain area, and underneath those branches you built a sukkah, says our Mishnah, Ki'ilu aso'a b'toich habayis. It's as if you built it in your house, and thus it's invalid. Guys, it sounds simple. Nothing is simple. Why did the Mishnah have to say that? We'll see in the Gemara a lot. Din number two, separate din. That sukkah al gabi sukkah. Sukkah al gabi sukkah means you have a two-story sukkah. The floor of the top one is kosher schach. Make that very clear. So therefore, the one who's downstairs, when he looks up, he's looking up at kosher schach. And above it, there's weiter kosher schach. It's not like tachas ilan. See, tachas ilan is very good. It's a picture on the top from Keva. There, as we'll speak out in the Gemara, the words are gavaldik. Another thing, says the Mishnah, only the top one is kosher, the top one is puzzle. The bottom one is puzzle. The bottom one is puzzle. Now, why would the bottom one be puzzle? Look inside. Let's start at least here. Get Rashi. The second line in the Amid, the Shnei Sechach and Yeshla. Even though there are taka two kosher schachs, but it's two. And Vikra puzzle Sukah Tacha Sukah. We'll see that there is a pasuk that's going to invalidate a double layer of schach. Now, the Gemara, we're going to learn the next daf. What does that mean? Like, what happens if there's only one tefach space or 4 tefachim space? What is the height between the two schachos where we apply this din that we learned from a pasuk? That you can't sit under a double layer of schach. We'll see that on daf here. A big machlekes, 3-way machlekes. But the moment it's defined as a separate layer, even though they're both kosher, and the Mishnah says the tachtoin is psula, and again, as we'll see, Rabbi Yirmiyah expounds the Mishnah by saying he gives us 4 cases. One case, the top one is good, the bottom one is bad, which is the Mishnah. One case will be pum faker, the top one will be psula, the bottom one will be ksheda. There are going to be cases where both will be ksheda and cases where both will be psula. That's the case of the Mishnah, is Elyahu kasher, tachtoin is psula. However, on this case of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and this we're going to leave for the next year. He says like this: Im ein doyoidin bo elyoina. If there are no tenants living in the upper one, then hatachtoinik sheida. It's not what you think. Whatever you think Rabbi Yehuda is saying is nishdas, and let's leave Rabbi Yehuda completely for the Gemara. Okay, let's first focus on the din of a sukkah under a tree. Here the problem is that the branches are not kosher schach. Comes along Rav and he has a gavaldik chiddush. Amaro, that loy shanu. Our
but why aren't the branches? Why aren't the branches I'm sorry, the branches of the tree
are still
over
connected.
the sukkah.
Okay, good.
I see. I'm sorry.
But there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot. Amara. Where did the Mishnah say that a sukkah under the ilan, under the branches, is not okay? That's only in a tree. Where the shade that's provided by those branches create more shade greater than its sunlight. In other words, you have something that's giving us the effect of schach, but its schach is possible. That's why the sukkah that's built underneath it is automatically invalidated. Avol says Rava, and this is a categorical statement. No matter when chamasai miruba mitzilasai, if the branches are so sparse that so much sunlight goes through them to the area underneath it, that you end up with more sunlight. The sunlight is greater than the shaded area. No matter, I'll explain the no matter in a moment, in all the scenarios, if you build a kasher, a sukkah underneath it, as long as the schach underneath it has enough, is creating more shade than sun, then a kasher. Counters the Gemara, doesn't make sense for you to make such a categorical statement. Mimai, frek the Gemara, logically doesn't make sense. And where did Rabbi needs Adaya? I'll explain the chiddush of Rabbi in a moment. What's his proof? He says every din we learned until now, it's not that we learned that much. We're up to only daf tes. But whenever the Mishnah gave a case where something is not kosher, like even in this Mishnah, Sukah al gabe sukkah, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that tachtoina psula. Or we had today in daf tes amud aleph, right? If you built the schach, you put the schach, not l'shem mitzvah sukkah beishamai psula or poislin, invalid. Why do you have to say the words that ki'ilu asah b'toich habayis? What are you adding with that? So says Rabbi Mimai, since Rabbeinu HaKadosh writes ki'ilu asah b'toich habayis, right? But you're always right? Psula. In other words, that's actually Rebbe hinting that he's limiting the invalidation. Elyahu kamashmalan, that ilan is only a problem if it's like a bias. Now, your home, the roof, the ceiling provides total shade or definitely more shade than sunlight. That has to be dumi the bias to invalidate it. Ma bias the ilan of our Mishnah that passes the sukkah underneath it is only if okay, so that's his right. Now the Gemara is going to challenge the logic of this din. It doesn't make sense. And now here, listen to these words. Even in a case where even if the branches of the tree that's connected is sparse and it allows a lot more sunlight than shade, still, how can Rava categorically say that the sukkah underneath it is kosher? Why would it be kosher? My have if farvas is good. The foliage of the tree sometimes will be needed to combine with the schach to create under the sukkah more shade than sunlight. Schach basel is the tree foliage. With the schach kosher, now guess, guys, the part of the schach, any schach that's directly underneath a branch, I don't care that this branch is providing kamat, no shade, but the shade that it does provide renders the schach underneath it non-existent. Because schach, like we mentioned, even according to Beis Hillel, why are you placing the schach? Even according to Beis Hillel, it's placed for shade. You don't need shade over here. That's how this Mishnah is linked to the previous sugya. And we're going to be consistent with that. That once you have invalid schach, something that's providing shade, but not halachically as a way that it's kosher as schach. Whatever kosher schach is placed directly underneath it, halachically is viewed as it does not exist. Now, guys, listen. If the tree is so sparse, and on the other hand, the schach that you put on the sukkah shloima is so gepakt, is so dense, that even after you discount all of the schach that's underneath the branches, even after you discount it, because halachically it's not existent, you will still have in the sukkah more shade than sunlight, then Rava makes sense. That we can accept. It makes sense. The problem is Rava didn't say that. Rava made a categorical statement. Rava said that as long as the branches don't give you more shade than sunlight, a sukkah that's built underneath it will be kosher. And that will include a scenario where if you discount, which you have to halachically discount, the schach that's under the leaves, then the schach in the sukkah is not enough. The only way you have more shade than sunlight in the sukkah is without discounting the schach that's under the foliage. But why? Why would you be allowed to do it? Really, that schach is not existent. So what is adding to the shade in the sukkah? What creates the shade? That which is closer to the sun. That's the non-kosher schach. So why are we allowed to combine and use schach pasel with schach kosher? Guys, we are introducing big topics here in Sukkah. It's good we have time. Guys, it's good. Yeah, it's clear. It's mamash. Okay. So, answers the Gemara. Rava made a categorical statement, but it's not that categorical. When do we say that even if the density in the schach of the sukkah is such that when you discount the schach under the foliage, you won't have more shade than sunlight, yet the sukkah is kosher? You're relying on branches that are connected to the tree? That's only if after you built your sukkah, you took those branches, we're learning Gemara Rashi, and you lowered it, and you mingled it in the schach.
Still attached?
Still attached, as long as the branches don't create the roiv of the schach. They are only creating the minority of the schach. Rashi adds the words, and they are not distinct, because when they were lowered, they were mingled with the schach. Means when you go into the sukkah and you look up, you don't know whether you're looking at a kosher piece of schach, or whether what you're looking at is the branch that's still connected to the tree. You don't see that from the sukkah. So we apply, says Rashi, the concept of bittul beroiv. And you know what bittul beroiv means? Is that now you are allowed to use the shade of the pasel schach to get to more shade than sunlight. Wow.
What's the foliage?
Foliage means the branches or the leaves. So Klar Shalom, this is very important. This.
Rabbi, living in halacha, what's the
Yes.
threshold over here? How does one decide? I mean, it seems like a very gray area.
No. It's not. You can say it's a little bit complex. Why is it great, Svika? So let's go. Let me repeat. 1 second.
Some person could say, the tree's not giving me so much shade, but someone else can say it's maybe a little different.
Well, that's in other words, you're asking a technical question, Svika, that sometimes the boundary. Forget about all these cases. Sometimes, the sukkah is sparse, but it's not very sparse. And how do you actually determine more shade than sunlight? Is it more shade in the top? Is it more shade in the bottom? These are technical questions. Today, I think with technology, it's easy to measure that. They measure it. Okay, but over here, step
Wait,
number
what does
one.
it mean that they lower it? You consider as if it's lowered? That's the idea?
No, Danny. You have to lower it.
But it's
No,
growing
by
out of a
lowering
tree.
it.
What does it mean that you lower it?
Okay.
Are you breaking it? If you
The
break it, it's
picture
no
that Keegan
longer.
gave, the tree, the branches of the tree are only a half a foot over the schach. It's right there. In Parshas Hashavot, it's not a mata, it's a shaver. It's connected to the tree. Guys, this is the yisoid. Schach that's kosher, that's directly under schach, that puzzle, is halachically non-existent. Remember that. That's a big rule. Huh? The kosher schach becomes non-existent. Here we're speaking about a case that you don't have in the sukkah. After discounting the non-existent, you don't have enough schach to make more shade than sunlight. So what are you doing? You're taking the branches that you know are not kosher. For some reason, you don't want to cut it off the tree. You want to leave it for after sukkah, so you don't want to cut your tree. And you mingle it bishechavoton. I'm reading inside Rashi, 14 lines from the top of the Amid. Hishpil, clear. Hishpil enough of lamato. You bend it down, and it's not enough. Mi'uravin you have to mingle it, you have to mix it, you have to intertwine it with the kosher schach. Why do you have to mingle it? Zakt Rashi, ve'ein niden ba'ayin. You can't look and say, this is the branch that's connected to the tree. That's the kosher schach. If you see that, there's no bittul. You have to use the step of bittul, and it's not bittul that it's not existent. Now that it's the minority is nullified in the majority, you are using the minority. You need it. That's the case. V'schach kosher rabo olav mevatla. Why Zakt Rashi? Because the mido ayraisa kol mili batal beruba. Amazing.
What about mechubar lekarka? No problem.
The branches are mechubar lekarka. The branches are schach pasal. But since the branches were intermingled in the kosher schach, as long as there's roiv kosher schach, bittul beroiv, with the detail that it has to be in a way that einanina ba'ayin. These nuances are very important. Now you get to use all of the schach to create more shade and sunlight. Categorically, it's good in that case. Says the
Is
Gemara,
there a reason we're focusing on a tree and not, let's say, a balcony or something hanging over?
Because
difference?
very good, Samach, because a balcony cannot be bent down. Very good. In other words, what did we learn today? That if we built a sukkah underneath a balcony, and if you were to discount the schach that's under the balcony, which you have to, you would not have enough shade, more shade than sunlight, then the sukkah is not kosher. Very good. B'diyuk. Of course, this bittul beroiv. So the Gemara says, no. Because it can get unentangled. It can go back. It can bounce back up. It can at least become more separated, where it will become nira ba'ayin. In other words, it's a very limited case where it's okay. Ma'al the tema nixar hechan de chavatan. To say that that's midrabanan, not okay. Not every time you're going to bend it down and you're going to mingle it properly. Says the Gemara, well, shkoyach, but I don't need Rava, I don't need Rana, Moira, Frek the Gemara. This concept, Hanami Tanina, we learned in a Mishnah, we didn't learn it yet, it's going to be on Daf Yud Aleph. What's the Mishnah? You built a sukkah. Guys, you built a sukkah with kosher schach. And now you want to make your sukkah even nicer. What did you do? Hidla means you lift. So you have grapevines. Now, for those of us who are learning Perek Echad Liyam, we just learned about the grapevines, how they lay on the floor. Was you have certain branches, whether it is from a grape, whether it is from a gourd. I'm a city boy. It must be that the vegetation that comes out of the gourd is lengthy, or from kisois, ivy. You have foliage that's now mechuber lakarka, and you throw it over, you lift it and you throw it on top of the sukkah. V'sichich al gabam, says the Mishnah Psula, but adds the Mishnah, ve'im hoya sichu chad b'mehem, if there is more valid schach than the grapevine, or if you later detached it, then the sukkah is kosher. Now we're going to learn about the later detaching it. We're going to learn about Tasu Yoleim and Ha'asui later. Let's just focus on the case where the Mishnah writes that if Hayasichu Chad b'mehem it's kosher. And here again, it's not so pasha to make that statement because that's the klal. Schach under invalid schach is non-existent halachically. And if the Mishnah is speaking not on a case where you mamish, where not only you lowered it, the word chavatin means to lower, but Rashi adds you lowered it, and then you mi'urav and you are ma'at of it. How come it's start of schach, pasalim, schach, kasha, like we explained above? Now, you can argue that the Mishnah is speaking about a scenario that there's so much kasha to schach that even after you discount the schach under the grapevine, you still have more shade than sunlight. The Mishnah would have to say it. The Mishnah doesn't give. The Mishnah makes a categorical statement. So it must be that the Mishnah is speaking about a case where you chavated it. And the Mishnah says it's okay. So the Gemara gives a gavaldik answer that bimadayik and digduk. That's something that we're not so great at yet. Hidla means, the word hidla means if one lifted. That's a lashon that's used for a b'diavad. If you did it, the Mishnah says it's kosher. You know how you would word this if you would have written this in a lachatchila way? You would say hadoila, but the Mishnah didn't use that expression. Ma'al the tema, only having the Mishnah, we would have thought based on the digduk that Rebbe says only b'diavad it's okay. To use bittul beroiv in such a metzias, like people are wondering, and you need that schach, You're using it. So that's why Rava wanted to make it clear that even lachatchila you can do it. Why did the Rebbe use the lashon b'diavad? The question has to be explained. Okay, weiter. Next.
Wait, Rabbi, can you just summarize? So where we're up to right now is that if there's ever a tree growing over your sukkah, it's puzzle. It's only when the shade is the branches are intermingled with your schach, and your schach has more. That's when Rabbi says.
No,
okay.
my takeaway is the opposite. It's very common here in Los Angeles that people who have backyards, that there is some foliage that's not hanging over the main part of your sukkah, but it's on the edges. When you look up your schach, if you have a little bit of tree or of a plant that's mechuber lakarka, it doesn't automatically invalidate your sukkah. What you should do is, now here Tzvika said, how do you do it? I don't know how you do it, but you have to have that explanation.
It would invalidate the area underneath those branches.
It only invalidates the schach directly underneath it. It makes it non-existent. Now, if you have so much schach in your sukkah, make believe it's not there. You have so much schach in the other parts of the sukkah that even if that would not be there and there wouldn't be the tree, there would still be in the sukkah more shade and sunlight than your sukkah's kosher. Okay, let's go weiter. It's getting a little bit.
You look all the way up at a palm tree that's all the way up, way, way high, but
exactly.
It's over your sukkah.
So samach, that's the word, that if discount the schach that's directly underneath it, it becomes non-existent. If you still have enough schach in your sukkah that is giving you more shade and sunlight, your sukkah is kosher. If you don't, then one solution will be to do this chavata. Put it in there. But I would just add something else, that for the people now that use mats, putting a nice branch of a tree will not affect bittul, because Rashi added that word. You're mevatel something when it's indiscernible. Once you can discern, like you have a mixture of kasher and treif, can't say it's always batel. Take out the treif if you can see it. Okay, weiter. Sukkah al gaba sukkah. Guys, sometimes we focus on sukkah al gaba sukkah. Sometimes we say sukkah tacha sukkah. It's the same thing. This is another din, my friends. Nothing to do with the first din of the Mishnah. The top sukkah schach is kosher. One would argue, you kidding me? I have 2 layers of schach. What do I care? We are actually, aside of leaving a little area in our minig through which you can see the stars, al pi Kabbalah, we have a lot of schach. What do you care? No, says the Mishnah, no. The fact that there's a double layered schach invalidates. Sukah v'sukah, says the Gemara, Tanach Rabbanon. Where do we get that from? Pasuk and Parshas Emoy. And guys, we're going to go back to aim la masoides, aim la mikra, if you remember, that even though we read the word basukois in the plural, but the Torah writes it without any vavs, which can also, when we darshan Torah Shabbal Peh, it can be read as a singular expression. And that's the singular expression. One schach. Basuka is teishru. V'loi basuka shetachas al sukkah. Sukkah means schach, and only sit under one layer of schach, not under a double layer of schach. V'loi basuka tachas ilan, which is another din. That's another din. V'loi basuka b'tech habayis. Frek the Gemara adarab. Basukais. You're reading it basukais. Double. Tarta mashma. I get it tachas ilan. I get a tachas habayis, but the first din of the Braisa, which is the second din of our Mishnah, what's wrong with the basukais? No. Basukais ksiv. If you can read inside the Gemara, it's not written with there's no vav, aim lamasoides, and it's being meramis to this din. Okay, so now that we have it's a limit. It's as the Torah says, one layer of schach. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, let's start. Rabbi Yirmiyah, not so quick, my friends. There are times that both of them will be kosher. Pamim, case number 2, both are puzzle. Pamim, the opposite of our Mishnah, that the tachtoina is going to be kosher, the Elyahu will be puzzle. This is the best one, we'll see soon. And number 4 is the case of our Mishnah, that the tachtoina is puzzle and the Elyahu will be kosher. Guys, all of this is Beshitas Chachamim. Don't forget, there is a Rabbi Yehuda that argues. We're going to get to that, God willing, in the next year. Explains the Gemara. Al pi seder rishon achron achron. Pa'amim sheshteihem kisheirois heichidami kegoyim shetachtoina chamasa meruba mitzilasa. The bottom sukkah's sunlight is greater than the shade. Listen to his chap, Rabbi Yirmiyah. So halachically, is that schach? No, it's not. If there would be nothing built underneath it, there's taka schach, but it's not enough. It's not creating more shade. So here again, what did Torah say? Sit under one layer of schach. Okay? The bottom schach is invalidated per se. Now, guys, let's not forget that we learned in the first Mishnah, and we paskin not like Rabbi Yehuda, that schach cannot be lamayla me'esramama. So that you have to work that out. And v'ha'olyoina, the top schach is good. And what's shad good? Silasa meruba mechamas. It creates more shade than sunlight. And the kaima elyoina b'toich esrim, and the schach of the top sukkah is not above 20 amas off the ground, off the bottom one. If that would have been that case, then again, it's not kosher schach for the bottom one, the valdik. So both, if you enter the top or the bottom, in both cases, you're sitting under the same one layer of kosher schach.
Rabbi, how could anyone sit on the top anyway? The schach falls through.
Okay. So you don't picture the little mat that we buy, that halavai was made not as a keli. We're speaking about the way our grandparents put schach. It was disconnected off the trees, but they put big pieces of foliage.
Thick bamboo.
They put thick bamboo. And who's going in there? Someone that didn't eat for a month. I don't know. I'm saying it's just it's shiur.
And Rabbi, in this case, what's the idea of the schach that's on the lower level? Are we considering that it doesn't exist?
Non-existent. And not only non-existent, it doesn't ruin. See, it doesn't ruin. You can argue what's underneath it. It's adding. What do I care if providing more schach? It's not pasul schach. It's non-existent schach. It's kosher schach that it's not enough. Let's keep on going. Number 2. We'll stop. Maybe we'll go number 2. We'll leave number 3. But number 3 is the best. But let's go to number 2. Number 2, right? 4 lines from the bottom. Pa'amim that both will be pasul. Hey chidami kigoin dit halvayu. Both are bona fide good schach. They are providing a lot of shade. Silasam meruba mechamasam. Now, that is the din of our Mishnah, as we learned in the Braisa, basukois, eim lamasoides, keilu basukas, like lashon yachid. So you're in the bottom. I know that the schach underneath you is giving you more shade. So is the one from the top. And so 1 second. So why is the Elyahu psula? A technical thing. That's why it's not a stira to the Mishnah. That the top schach is lamayla me'esrem amma, not from the ground. I don't care about the ground. It's lamayla me'esrem amma from the floor of the top one. The kaimelon elyoina lamayla me'esrem amma, again from the floor of the top one. You're good? Pasha. So we have to emphasize, guys, that if the one on the top would have sparse schach, then you can't say that the guy in the bottom is sitting under a double layer of schach. There was a chiddush to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Was on one hand, we're not validating the top schach, even for the top sukkah, because it's above 20 amas from the top sukkah. But it's enough schach to invalidate the bottom sukkah, because at the end of the day, we do call it schach. It's not non-existent schach. Non-existent schach is when you don't have enough of it. Enough schach that creates more tzeil than chama is schach, but since it's l'mayla me'esrim, it can't function to kasher the top sukkah. I think we should stop over here.
L'mayla me'esrim is from the floor or
of
from
the top? From the floor of the top, Danny. From the floor of the top.
It's like over 30. Let's say the bottom one was.
Yeah. Very, very important. Very important. Yeah. Okay. We'll stop over here. So we're up to number 3 and number 4 of Rabbi Yirmiyah to be continued.
When you talk about schach being batel, does the rule of davar shebeminyan apply at all? Because some of them you could actually count how many pieces are there, how many are pasul, how many are providing shade, how many are not.
The rule of davar shebeminyan is not whether you can count it, but it's how is that material sold. If something is sold by number, if something is sold by quantity.
Sounds like someone's in kashrus.
No, someone's in kashrus, correct. But I'm saying, but samach, in other words, logs can be sold by weight. It's not only sold. Esher b'binyan, kol sheb'binyan, Rabbi Yechonah, shlakish. It works.
Okay. I don't know anyone around there who's in kashrus, Danny. But anyway, have a good shot.